Hello and welcome everyone to the first of our 2022 summer webinar and open house series, How to Maximize Your Nutrient Intake on a Plant-Based Diet. Over the last several years of summer webinars, we've looked at a variety of health topics such as ketogenic diets, intermittent fasting, misconceptions about fruit, calorie density and weight management, how our immune system works, and where to get specific nutrients like calcium, iron, vitamin D, and vitamin B12, all in relationship to a whole food plant-based dietary approach. For those of you who don't know us yet, I'm Dr. Rick Dina, and you'll be hearing from Dr. Karen Dina in a few minutes. We're both chiropractic physicians who have been on the whole food plant-based path for 35 and 34 years each, respectively, essentially all of our adult lives, and are board certified and licensed in the state of California. We've hosted plant-based summits for the past 7 years where we've interviewed successful, healthy, long-term raw vegan educators and plant-based doctors to share with you how you can be successful on this path over the long term as well. We're also the authors of the Raw Food Nutrition Handbook. Now you can see here the banners for the first 5 years all said something about raw food. In 2021, we worked with Better Life Summits and had our Energy Reset Summit, where we branched out a bit further and had more of our plant-based doctor colleagues join us, while still having many raw food educators as well. In thinking further about what the clearest message is for what we're the biggest advocates of, which is including an abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables as part of a whole food plant-based diet, we called our summit the Fruit and Vegetable Power Summit. As those of you who joined us for it recall, the questions and discussions were generally centered around fruit and vegetable-based eating, as well as topics that support eating as many of them as you can enjoy and improving your health as a result, such as chefs sharing recipes, how fasting fits in, how plant-based eating affects our hormones, etc. We like this theme and we plan on sticking with it for years to come. Our approach can be summed up by whole food, all plant, based on fruits and vegetables. Now within that framework, we are very inclusive and affirming, while at the same time encouraging people to derive as much of their diets from fresh fruits and vegetables as they can comfortably enjoy. We're not going to make anybody wrong for eating quinoa, chickpeas, or steamed kale or broccoli, or even if they're a veggie-friendly omnivore who's heading in the direction of including more fruits and vegetables and other whole natural plant foods in their diets. No matter where you are on this path, if heading in this direction sounds reasonable and desirable to you, better yet exciting, that's great. From just getting started to having been there yourself for many years or maybe even decades and wanting further education and refinement. Speaking of further education and refinement, we are the developers and instructors of the year-long Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online and interactive plant-based curriculum that we're going into our 7th year of teaching. We're also the developers and instructors of the precursor to that course, the Science of Raw Food Nutrition, that we taught for 10 years live and in person. For those of you interested, we'll share more about our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition plant-based curriculum later on in the webinar. Now, over the years, we have become known for our thoroughness and our scientific accuracy, as well as our ability to make complex subjects easy to understand and to see how each detail fits into a cohesive whole. We're also known for our encouraging approach that takes unnecessary hurdles out of people's way, and we're known to be authentic, straightforward, and no nonsense. We tell it like it is, and we let the information and the results speak for themselves. Before we continue, we would like to let you know that the information and opinions expressed by us in this webinar are not intended to be used as medical advice and should not be used to diagnose or treat any medical condition or as a substitute for individual health care. This webinar is presented with the understanding that we're not liable for misconception, misuse, or adverse effects resulting from its use. any type of dietary change, nutritional therapy, or fasting should always be undertaken with the supervision of a qualified healthcare practitioner. Now, we may end up guiding you as students, as clients, as patients, but please understand that watching this webinar does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Each one of the webinars we've had in the past, including this year as well, all follow the same basic structure. They start with the introduction that we're just about at the end of now, and then they go on to briefly describe Dr. Karen's background and my background. Now this year we're going to keep it very, very brief, but in past years we've gone into more depth and detail about some of our backgrounds, what got us started on this path, and what experiences we had early on that have led us to what we're still doing today. Every year, we use the same background introductions for each webinar that year, but year to year, it's different. So 2020 is different than 2021, different than 2019, but all 2019s are the same, all 2020s are the same. I think you understand. Then we have webinar-specific sample educational content, which is different for every webinar. Sometimes we borrowed things from one or another, but for the most part, they're all different. And in addition to providing valuable information, what those webinars do that we're about to see in a few minutes after the backgrounds is they give you sample teaching content. So if you're thinking about joining us in the future to continue your education with plant-based nutrition, you'll get an idea of how we teach so you know what to expect in the course. If you never join us again in the future and you just want to go watch all the different webinars, you can learn a lot and hopefully get a lot of value out of them. Then, for those of you interested in continuing with us, we talk about our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition, what you can expect, what the outcomes are, why people join us, and then how the content is delivered so you can see if that's a good fit for you. Then if you're here live or for a live replay, we'll be here to answer questions about the webinar content or about our educational offerings at the end. If you are watching a recording, then we're not here at the end. However, you can either, if you're already on our email list or you'd like to join it by going to rawfoodeducation.com and putting in your email address, then you can take a look at your inbox for future live webinars where we will be there at the end to answer any questions that you have. So now that the introduction is complete, we'll move on to a few minutes of Dr. Karen's background.
I found raw food at a time when I was experiencing notable fatigue for which there was apparently no answer. I was in college at the time and I was sleeping 10, 12, and sometimes even more hours per night, and still waking up non-refreshed. I saw 3 medical professionals, and after multiple lab tests and evaluations, I had a diagnosis: fatigue of unknown origin. They had a whole list of everything that I didn't have, but could not pinpoint the source of my fatigue. I asked every single one of them if my fatigue may have had anything to do with my college diet and lifestyle. They all emphatically said no. Things really started to change, however, when a friend gave me a copy of a book that discussed vegan diets and the connection between diet and health. I also learned about the connections between diet and the environment and the way animals are treated. And with all these compelling arguments, I was open to giving this approach a try, and I became vegan. In addition to feeling good about eating compassionately and leaving a lighter footprint on the earth, I was so excited to find that my fatigue actually started to improve, despite what the so-called experts, in this case the medical professionals, said would happen. This personal experience opened the door to my thinking that diet really could make a difference in health and left me open to exploring other opportunities. When I learned about and implemented a raw food diet, my energy soared far beyond the impressive improvements that I experienced by eating vegan. Long story short, my fatigue vanished, along with a variety of other symptoms that I'd had for years, and I had more energy than I knew what to do with. I could not remember a time when I felt better. I started to look healthier and I slept better. I enjoyed exercising and my digestion improved. I was so inspired by the health results I was experiencing that I felt compelled to learn more about the inner workings of the human body, nutrition, and the diet-health connection. I really wanted to immerse myself in learning as much as I could, so I earned a second undergraduate degree in biology and then received doctorate-level education in naturopathic medicine and chiropractic, which helped me to put everything that I observed into perspective and on a much deeper level. Over the years, I've refined and revised my approach to raw food and tailored it to my individual needs. And we can show you how to do this too. Next, Dr. Rick will share with you a bit about his background and experience with raw food and plant-based nutrition. So take it away, Dr. Rick.
Here are a couple of before and after photos from my late teens. In the process of going from the photo on the left to the photo on the right, as you can probably imagine, I felt so much better. This inspired me to keep learning as much as I could. So I read tons of books, magazines, I attended conferences, I listened to audio programs while driving in the car, and filled myself up with as much great information as I could. The National Health Association, known then as the ANHS, or American Natural Hygiene Society, was one of the primary educational resources for me at that time, and it has been ever since. Couple of quick highlights. While I was a junior in college, I water fasted for 14 days in my college dorm. Everyone thought I was crazy, but it was an incredible experience, and most of my childhood allergies that were giving me trouble the day that this photo was taken were almost completely gone after that. Later that year, at the end of my junior year, I skipped spring weekend where all the bands were coming and there were lots of great parties to drive several hours to attend a different organization's natural hygiene conference. And my friends thought I was crazy with that too, but it was an incredible experience. Like I mentioned previously in the introduction, in past years I've included more details about my background, such as athletic endeavors, race times, etc. So if you're interested, you can check those out. But for now, we'll keep it succinct and keep things moving. After finishing college, I moved down to Florida to work at Hippocrates Health Institute. After leaving there, I traveled around the United States with the Juice Man Company, selling juicers and sharing with people about the benefits of fruits and vegetables and their juices. Then I wanted to go back to school, so I went to chiropractic school to earn a doctorate degree, and from all of the science classes I took there, my level and my depth of understanding everything I knew up to that point about nutrition, and so much of what I've learned since then, all increased dramatically. Graduating from that program also allowed me to join the fasting staff at True North Health, and I was there for 4 years. During that time, I got to see what happens with several hundred patients when we get out of the way and allow the body to heal itself. It was absolutely extraordinary. Now, at that point, I was stolen away by my girlfriend at the time, who was attending Bastyr University, and I contacted them and actually put a curriculum together and taught a class there to the naturopathic medical students. As it turns out, my girlfriend at the time was Dr. Karen, so there was a good reason for leaving True North, but it really took something big to get me to leave True North because I was very much in my element there. So, skipping ahead a few years, we had a chiropractic practice and we were consulting with people nutritionally, and then Karen and I got together in between patients and evenings and weekends over a few years and put together a curriculum known as the Science of Raw Food Nutrition. We taught that live and in person for 10 years until the school we were teaching at closed, and then since 2016, we've been teaching our online 12-month updated, expanded, improved curriculum that we continue to update each year called Mastering Raw Food Nutrition. During the years also, I've worked with several hundred people individually, guiding them dietarily, including lab work, and a lot of what I've learned there and insights that I've gotten incorporate into our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition curriculum. So we bring all of this together. And again, at the end, you can learn more about the program. We've now covered the introduction, and you've heard from Dr. Karen and myself about our backgrounds. Having said that, we'll now move on to our educational topic for this webinar. Having said that, we'll now move on to our educational topic for this webinar, how to maximize nutrient intake on a plant-based diet. In this presentation, we have two sets of dietary comparisons of several key nutrients to help illustrate how we can maximize our nutrient intake from plant foods. We'll start out by comparing a typical starch-centered diet that includes some fruits and vegetables to a vegetable and fruit-centered diet that includes some starches. So if we take a look here for breakfast, we're going to have oatmeal from Quaker whole grain oats with some apple, raisins, 1 tablespoon of ground flax meal, that's going to come in handy later especially, and a little bit of ground cinnamon. For lunch, we're going to have a couple of sprouted grain tortillas, and what we're going to wrap inside of those is brown rice, black beans, some avocado, tomato, and zucchini. And for dinner, we're keeping it very simple here. We're going to have 2 cups of broccoli, that's steamed, and we're going to have 1 cup each of quinoa and chickpeas. Now, let me make it very clear that compared to just about anything else that people are eating out there, this is an extraordinarily healthful diet. By eating this type of diet, people can and have, and fortunately will continue in the future, to recover from health challenges like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease and other forms of vascular disease, obesity, autoimmune diseases, and even some types of cancer. Not only that, people note that they feel better, they have more energy, they can think more clearly, and improve not only their lifespan, but their functional health span, if you will, as well. So what we're going to compare that to now is our vegetable and fruit-centered diet. And for breakfast, we just totally changed it up. Instead of oatmeal, we're having a fruit and green smoothie. 2 oranges, 2 bananas, some mango, which is actually frozen, and we're going to put 2 leaves of kale in there. So that's instead of oatmeal. For lunch, instead of the burritos, we're going to have a very similar meal actually, but it's going to be salad, brown rice and black beans, and some steamed veggies. So if you look here at the rice, the beans, the avocado, tomato, and zucchini, and we go back to what we ate previously, it's nearly identical except for the 4 Roma tomatoes instead of 2. And instead of the Ezekiel tortillas, we're replacing that with lettuce, and you can combine that with the tomato and zucchini and make a salad out of it. And we're also adding some steamed vegetables, a cup each of kale and carrots, and 1.5 cups of cauliflower. For dinner, we're going to keep the 2 cups of broccoli, and instead of 1 cup each of quinoa and chickpeas, we're going to use a 1/2 cup each, and we're going to replace those calories with a large salad and dressing. So for that salad, we're going to have 1/2 a head of romaine, so the other 1/2 that was left over from lunch, couple more tomatoes, 1/2 cup each of shredded carrots, zucchini, and cucumber, and we're going to make a dressing out of lemon juice, celery, onion is optional here, but it's there if you want it, and some chia seeds and walnuts. And so there we have the basic comparison of the 2 diets. So the starch-centered diet here, we've got in these sort of amber waves of grain color, and the one with more vegetables we have in a green color. Even though we added a greater volume of food with the vegetable diet, there's about 100 fewer calories there. As you can see, the macronutrient profile is nearly identical for each of these diets. So let's jump in and take a look at what we have. So first of all, we've got low amounts of saturated fat. Now, typically, the typical conventional nutritional recommendations out there is that we want to keep less than 10% of our calories from saturated fat. If you do the math here, you find that about 2.5 to 3% of the calories from each of these diets comes from saturated fat. So that is excellent, and there is no cholesterol on this diet either. So that's part of the benefit right there. Adding to that, we have both diets very high in fiber. 73 grams is excellent. 90 grams is even better. Fiber does so many important things in our body, too long of a list to cover in this presentation, but it binds to toxins, it binds to cholesterol, it binds to excessive sex hormones, and feeds our microbiome that produce short-chain fatty acids that have all sorts of benefits all over the body. So both of these are excellent. The general recommendations for fiber are 25 grams per day for women, 35 grams for men. Most people only get about 15, so this is super excellent. Continuing on, we see a huge difference here in beta carotene, about 5,500 for the Starch Center diet and over 100,000 for the diet with more fruits and vegetables. That's 20 times greater. Now, this is actually vitamin A equivalents, and it gets a little confusing because beta carotene converts to vitamin A. There's not vitamin A directly in plant foods, but then alpha carotene and beta cryptoxanthin, a couple of the other carotenoids, can also convert to vitamin A. But the bottom line is here, the majority of this comes from beta carotene, and beta carotene is a super awesome antioxidant. More of that generally is better. You know, one of the things I love about the software called Chronometer is when you put everything in to get the nutrient analysis, which I did for this program, and you hover the cursor over one of these listings, a menu pops up telling you where you got each of or which foods in your diet supplied that nutrient. So what I wanted to show you here is just the lettuce alone has about 55,000 IU, so almost half of the beta carotene. About a third of the beta carotene comes from the carrots. We've all heard that they're a good source. And then we can see the kale, in addition to the lettuce, the broccoli, in other words, the other greens, and some of the other fruits and vegetables also contain beta carotene. So huge increase in beta carotene. And again, to be clear, not all of it, not even a majority of it, came from the carrots, but they did make a significant contribution, about 1/3. Taking a look at vitamin C, we can see that by adding those fruits and vegetables, we nearly tripled the vitamin C content. I think most of you out there have heard of Dr. T. Colin Campbell, extraordinary researcher. We had the good fortune of interviewing him last year for our summit, and a few years before that. I've gotten to know him a bit personally over the years. Those of you who know him know he became famous initially for the China study, initially called the China Health Project. And a quote from him here says, "Plasma antioxidant levels, especially vitamin C and beta carotene, which we just looked at, are inversely associated with several cancers." So that means the higher levels of those antioxidants, the lower the incidence of a variety of different types of cancers. So that is relevant to what we are discussing. Taking a look at vitamin E. Vitamin E nearly doubled here by adding more, mostly from the vegetables here. And now vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects unsaturated fats from being damaged by free radicals in the body, where they can go on and cause a variety of different problems, including vascular disease. Typically, higher fat foods are higher in vitamin E because, again, it protects the fat in those foods. But here we had the same amount of fat in each diet, yet there's almost double in the diet richer in vegetables. Vitamin K increased almost 5-fold. And so you may have heard of the carnivores and the omnivores make a big deal about vitamin K and vitamin K2. This is actually vitamin K1, but the research is still young in this area. But what it appears is that when you have a healthy microbiome, which is fed dramatically by a high fiber diet that bacteria in your gut can convert vitamin K1 into vitamin K2. There's more to the story than that, but in any case, it appears that it has a positive effect on bone health. And so we get a dramatic increase by adding vegetables to the starch center diet. Folate here more than doubled from a very solid level to a super solid level. So that is also great to see. Now for omega-3s, 1.7 grams in the starch center diet and 5.3 grams in the vegetable and fruit center diet. Now, some of you have been around our work for a while. You'll know that omega-3 fats and fatty acids in general is one of my very favorite topics. If you want to learn more about this, among other places, you can go back to last year's August 2021 webinar, and I talk all about omega-3s. So here, let's take a quick look at where the omega-3 sources were for each of these diets. So remember I mentioned that 1 tablespoon of flax meal in the oatmeal in the morning. 0.9 grams of the 1.7 of omega-3s came from the flax meal. So without the flax meal, if we add the rest of this up, we get to 0.8 grams. The recommendations are 1.1 grams for women and 1.6 grams for men. So we're not making it on the starches from either of those, whereas in the vegetable and fruit-based diet, even if we take away the chia seeds and walnuts, just from the greens here, the lettuce, the kale, and the other vegetables, we are left with 2.5 grams of omega-3, which covers everybody's needs really well. We just happen to have a little extra from the chia and walnut in the dressing there. And by the way, again, a lot more about this in previous previous omega-3 things that I have discussed. Some of you may have seen me in years past on different summits, such as the Mastering Diabetes Summit or Chef AJ Summits, where we actually look at their fatty acid profile. And all 3 of those people mentioned were excellent without adding really any fat or any appreciable amount of fat to their diet. As long as there's enough leafy greens in the diet, you can actually cover your needs that way, which is fantastic. So in omega-6s, we went up a little bit. Now don't forget, same amount percentage of calories from fat in each diet. So we've got a bit more omega-3s, a bit more omega-6s. Those are the 2 essential fats. So the fatty acid profile is a little bit different. Really, though, both of these are fine. And by the way, sometimes if those of you who use Chronometer, you'll see that it says you need to get to 12 grams of omega-6. I don't think you necessarily need to be that high. You probably need about 3 or 4. Both of these diets cover things. Now, we can also take a look at the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and generally speaking, lower is better, but both of these are in an excellent range. So definitely covered there either way. How about calcium? We more than doubled the calcium. That's pretty extraordinary by adding plenty of vegetables. Now, even if you're on an alkalizing diet and you don't have to consume extra calcium to compensate for all the acidity from meat, from processed foods, especially from soda with the phosphoric acid in there, you might not need as much calcium as the normal recommendations are. Having said that, though, 469, that's a little bit on the low side. I'm not totally comfortable with that, but over here at 1,000 or more, that is fantastic. And by the way, when you add those vegetables that get you more calcium, so many other nutrients come along with that. So this is a pretty good benchmark for overall nutrition. Speaking of other nutrients that come along with it, other alkalizing minerals, we increased our magnesium here by adding the vegetables as well. Both of these diets cover magnesium pretty well. The one with more vegetables does yet a better job. How about sodium? 400 about versus a little under 500. You know, there's vegetables are richer in sodium than starches and fruit, especially, as we'll see coming up. So we've got a little increase in sodium, but still really at a very reasonable level. The average sodium intake in the United States is about 3,500, way up off the chart here, milligrams per day. I like to see that level underneath 1,000. From whole natural foods, you get a few hundred. Both of these are fine. Sodium's counterpart in many ways is potassium. So by increasing vegetables, we've more than doubled the potassium there. And a lot of people like to look at the sodium to potassium ratio. So we've got 1 to 9.6 on the starch-centered diet, 1 to about 17 on the vegetable and fruit-centered diet. And just to put that in perspective, back in our hunter-gatherer days, our average sodium to potassium ratio was about 1 to 16. But both of these are very good. Okay, we have a notable increase in iron from 19, which is solid, up to 23, which is even better. That should cover, both of those should cover everybody's needs except for pregnant women, where you need a little bit more, but both of those solid, but we went up a little bit by adding more vegetables. And zinc stayed about the same. The RDAs for zinc are 8 milligrams for women and 11 milligrams for men, so both of these diets covered our zinc needs. Keep that in mind for our next comparison. So let's just take a quick summary of this before moving on. What I've done here is whichever diet had the most of whatever nutrient, was for everything except calories, it was the vegetable and fruit centered diet. I put that up at 100, and then I put the relative amount compared to 100 of each nutrient from the starch centered diet down below, so we can see the relative differences. So there was 100 fewer calories on the vegetable and fruit centered diet. Fiber went up about 20% or so. We saw a 20 times increase in beta carotene, about a tripling of vitamin C, approximately a doubling of vitamin E, a quadrupling of vitamin K, more than doubling of folate. We saw significant increases in omega-3 and omega-6. Those essential fats are really important, even though the overall fat intake did not go up. We saw about a doubling of calcium, increase in magnesium, little more sodium, but a lot more potassium, but everything was good in both of those, and a bit more iron, and zinc was solid in both of those. Hopefully, by going through this analysis, this message that vegetables, especially leafy greens, which includes lettuce, are super nutrient dense and super important to consume as much of as you can enjoy in your diet. Hopefully, by going through this analysis, that message is sinking in at a deeper level than it would have if we just simply told you that without going through the analysis. Speaking of things sinking in, we'll go to phase 2 of our comparisons here, where we're going to look at a fruit-only diet versus a fruit and lettuce diet versus a fruit and vegetable diet. So keeping things really simple here. The fruit-only diet, 4 extra large slices of watermelon for breakfast, 3, these are extra large mangoes for lunch, and 8 medium bananas for dinner. We'll compare that with the same breakfast and lunch and nearly the same dinner, but we took away 0.8 bananas, almost 1 banana, and we replaced almost the exact same amount of calories with a very large head of lettuce. So 500 grams or about 1.1 pounds. That's a super extra large head of lettuce. So then for the fruit and vegetable diet, same breakfast, same lunch. We went from 8 bananas to 4 bananas, and we replaced those calories with the head of romaine that was still there from the fruit and lettuce diet. But then we added, to make a salad here and some dressing, a couple Roma tomatoes, some zucchini, some cauliflower, and celery, half an avocado, and the juice of 1 small lemon. So let's see how we did. I designed these specifically so they had nearly identical amounts of calories. 90% carbohydrate, 6% protein, 4% fat from fruit only. We went a little up in protein and a little up in fat, just by adding 1 head of lettuce. And by adding some more vegetables and some avocado, we got protein up to 9% and fat up to 11%. That fits the profile of 80-10-10, which is something that is familiar to a lot of you. Okay, so how did we do in saturated fat? These diets are lower in fat than the previous ones, right? About 5 to 10% fat instead of 19. So we are lower in saturated fat than before, and still, of course, no cholesterol. That is fantastic to see. Now, dietary fiber from the fruit only, 45 grams. We add just a head of lettuce, we get up to 53, and we add more vegetables, we get up to 64. You may recall that the starch-centered diet had 73 grams of fiber, and the vegetable and fruit-centered diet had 90 grams of fiber. So the vegetable and fruit diet had more vegetables compared to the fruit and vegetable diet, so I switched those, and vegetables per calorie are higher in fiber than fruit. So all of them beat the recommendations, but generally speaking, more fiber is going to be even more beneficial. Okay, so beta carotene, 18,000 on the fruit-only diet. Wow, by taking most of a banana away and adding just that large head of lettuce, we see a dramatic increase in beta carotene. It's not just orange things that have beta carotene, but a lot of green leafy things are very rich in beta carotene, and the rest of the vegetables added just a little bit. So lettuce can really be a powerhouse if we're going to consume enough of it. Here we have vitamin C. So fruit diet is solid, and the lettuce didn't really add much vitamin C, but we did get some more by adding those vegetables, although probably most of the difference here is from the tomatoes, which botanically are a fruit. But in any case, all of these are solid, but the starch-centered diet only had 237 milligrams of vitamin C, and the vegetable and fruit-centered diet previously had 671. So it's important to get fruits and vegetables in, and especially fruit tends to be very rich in vitamin C, a lot richer than you find in starches. Now, vitamin E is excellent on all diets. The starch-centered diet and the vegetable and fruit diet were at 10 and 18 respectively, and this fruit and vegetable diet is at 14 with only 10% of the calories coming from fat, and it makes sense that the vegetable and fruit diet with 19% of the calories from fat would be higher at a level of 18. As we said previously, the more fat you eat, the more vitamin E you need, because vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects unsaturated fats from getting damaged by free radicals. Now, vitamin K, very low on the fruit-only diet. Wow, what a difference a large head of lettuce makes. We go up over tenfold by adding some lettuce, and we go up even a little bit more by adding the additional vegetables. The starch-centered diet was at 376, and the vegetable and fruit-centered diet was almost double, that's actually more than double this one, at 1731. So the vegetables are the really major source of vitamin K. Okay, let's take a look at folate here. The fruit diet, pretty solid on folate. Just add that head of lettuce, you got a lot more, and you add a few more vegetables, and you get even more. The starch-centered diet was 912. The vegetable and fruit diet that had more vegetables than this fruit and vegetable diet was at about 20, actually up there, at about 2100. So both fruits and vegetables are excellent sources of folate, and vegetables are even extra good compared to fruit or compared to starches. Now, the fruit-only diet here in omega-3s, we said the recommendations are 1.1 grams for women, 1.6 grams for men. I kind of like to see people get about 2 grams of omega-3s per day. So, you don't really cover it on the fruit diet. Now, that one head of lettuce added about a half a gram of omega-3, which is great, and a few more vegetables added a little bit more. This doesn't make it for men. This doesn't make it for anybody. This just makes it. I'm at least reasonably comfortable at this level, not so comfortable with these other two. But as I mentioned before, if you eat enough of those leafy green vegetables, even without adding flax, chia, walnuts, hemp, etc., you can meet your omega-3 needs just from eating abundance of leafy green vegetables, which is fantastic to know. Omega-6s, we don't want too many of those because we've heard that they're pro-inflammatory, and that's true at very high levels, but we do need enough. You don't need the 12 grams that Chronometer says, but you probably need about 3 or 4 grams per day. So none of these diets quite make it. At least the one with the most vegetables is the closest. And the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, that's actually excellent for all of these diets. Okay, moving on to calcium. Not so good here. The fruit-only diet really, really lacking in calcium. When we add that head of lettuce, we get close to doubling the amount of calcium, and 400 is getting better. But even without a lot of other acidity in your diet, 400 is still not that great. 612 is actually starting to get reasonable and may actually do it for people who eat whole natural plant foods without as much acidity in their diet because they don't need the extra calcium to buffer that. But if you can get higher, like up to almost 1100, like the heavier vegetable diet, I think that's even more preferable because a lot of other good minerals come along with that, such as magnesium. Now, fruit, not too bad for magnesium. The RDA for magnesium is about 320 for women and 420 for men. So all of these diets cover that, but when you add extra vegetables, you get some extra, but fruit by itself does a pretty good job there for magnesium. So here we are again for sodium. We said the average American consumes way up here, a few screens up, 3,500 milligrams per day, way too much. I like to see sodium below 1,000. So, you get 300, 400, 500, 200 or so from fruits and vegetables. That gives you a little bit of leeway for a little bit of miso or whatnot. But since the beginning of this year, I've had none of that. So just get it from fruits and vegetables. But levels around 30 or 70, I get very uncomfortable with that. That just seems much too low. In fact, when I've read through medical physiology textbooks, they don't say you need 500 milligrams like a lot of people recommend. They say to really cover our physiological needs, you need about 100 to 150 milligrams of sodium. But this is just really, I get uncomfortable with this. Up at 349, I can breathe a sigh of relief. That's really good. In fact, I've analyzed people, many diets based on fruits and vegetables, and they typically provide 200, 300, 400 milligrams of sodium per day, and that is really good. As you can guess here, based on adding lettuce and then adding more vegetables, seeing this increase, you can see that vegetables per calorie are higher in sodium than fruit is. It's not just celery, vegetables in general across the board. So another really important, another nutrient that really illustrates the importance of an abundance of vegetables in your diet in addition to fruit. Now, plenty of potassium in all of these. What's interesting though is people have always heard about, potassium's in bananas. And there were a fair amount of bananas in here, 8 bananas, and we've got plenty of potassium. But we took a banana away and added the same amount of calories of lettuce, and we got more potassium. Then we took 3 more bananas away and added more vegetables and got even more potassium, meaning vegetables, generally speaking, per calorie, are actually a richer source of potassium than fruit, even bananas. And, nutrition isn't as simple as we always hear. Bananas are not the only source of potassium, Oranges aren't the only source of vitamin C, and dairy products are not the only source of calcium. If we look at the sodium to potassium ratio, again, our ancestors were about 1 to 17. This fruit and vegetable diet's 1 to 26. That's fantastic. And these other ones are just kind of crazy because sodium was so ridiculously low. Okay, how about iron? Fruit by itself, not really enough iron. Men, 8 grams. Women from puberty to menopause, 18. So this one kind of just barely covers it, but we really see the importance of adding vegetables, especially leafy green vegetables here, from a plant-based diet perspective or from an iron perspective. And just to review, the starch-centered diet provided 19 and the vegetable and fruit diet provided 23. So that helps illustrate the importance of vegetables for iron. Let's take a look at zinc here. We mentioned that the RDA for zinc is 8 milligrams for women, so about up here, and 11 milligrams for men. 11.5 was what the starch-centered and the vegetable and fruit-centered diet got us. Now, vegetables are generally a solid source of zinc per calorie, but they're low in calorie density, so you have to eat a lot of them for the zinc to really add up. Beans are actually a pretty good source as well, and it's actually easier to consume more calories from them when they're cooked because they're a lot more calorie dense in general than vegetables. One thing you can do if you like eating raw, like Dr. Karen and I do, you can sprout some lentils, and they're a very solid source of zinc. So in any case, because beans and vegetables are good sources of zinc, that's why we saw higher levels on the previous diets than we see here. But you can imagine just adding more vegetables to this diet and you can bring your zinc up to a solid level. All right, so let's just take a look at the relative comparisons here to summarize. Virtually identical calories. As we added more vegetables, we increased our fiber. As we added more vegetables, especially that head of lettuce, we tripled our beta carotene. We got about a 30% increase in vitamin C by adding vegetables. We got an increase in vitamin E, a dramatic increase in vitamin K, and between the vitamin K and the calcium increase with the vegetables, I'm feeling much happier about people's bones that way. Pretty dramatic increase in folate, more than doubling by adding vegetables. More omega-3s, more omega-6s, a lot more calcium, over double like we just talked about. More magnesium, another alkalizing mineral that helps buffer acidity, that can help provide strength for our bones. We went from what I consider to be an uncomfortable level of sodium to a reasonable level of sodium. We increased potassium also, increased iron, and increased zinc by adding more vegetables. So it should be abundantly clear by now the importance of vegetables to round out our nutrient profile. They're just so extremely important. So what else can we do to maximize our nutrient intake? So we want to, as we've been saying here, consume mass quantities of vegetables. Our preferred method of doing that, number one choice, is through gigantic salads. We asked most of our speakers on our summit this year to show us their salad bowls or to talk about how many vegetables went into their salad, and we saw very large quantities. That's one of the reasons the people who we interviewed have been successful over the long term. We interviewed a number of chefs this year. Kathy Fisher, Katie May, Lissa Maris, they're not only just chefs, but they make a lot of food. Chris Kendall, Matt Bennett, Carla Martins, John Kohler has a lot of great tips and stuff for getting more vegetables into your salads, making fun dressings. So we would encourage you to check those people out and others for increasing the size of your salads. Blending. There's a few different ways of blending. So you can, they call a blended salad. It isn't always really blended. It means you put some lettuce or whatever in the food processor and pulse it with the S-blade. Gets the volume down a little bit because it gets the airspace out. Makes it a little bit easier to eat more more greens. So that's a good tip. Blending. We make a lot of dressings, and you can make them into sauces and soups also by blending vegetables and a few nuts and seeds in a dressing, like with celery or tomato as the base, and then you pour that over a lot more vegetables. That increases your vegetable content in the dressing. And smoothies. It was interesting when I looked at the orange, banana, and mango smoothie with and without just 2 leaves of kale, 20 calories from kale, caused a dramatic increase in the nutrition level across the board. And that's one of the real values of fruit and green smoothies. Now, juicing. You definitely leave off some of the nutrients in the pulp, but you can potentially dramatically increase your quantity of vegetables consumed. So we think juicing is a really good strategy. And steaming is another excellent strategy. So for example, there is some nutrient loss from steaming. Dr. Karen goes into a lot of depth and detail about that in our plant-based year-long curriculum. But let's just say it depends on the nutrient and whatnot. You're going to lose more vitamin C. You won't really lose the minerals. But let's just say on average, you lose 20% of the nutrients when you steam vegetables compared to eating them raw. I like to use raw broccoli as an example. I don't really like eating broccoli raw that much. It's kind of bitter tasting and it's very fibrous. But if I lightly steam some broccoli so it just barely gets soft, maybe just has a little bit of crunch to it, I lose a few nutrients, but I can eat 2, 3, 4 times as much. So I come out way ahead overall nutrient-wise. So steaming, we think, is a fantastic way of increasing your vegetable content. And I'll just mention, just for fun, there's a couple of examples here where if you steam something like spinach that's very high in oxalic acid, which binds to divalent cation minerals with a +2 charge like calcium and magnesium and zinc, that we saw here, you actually decrease the oxalic acid level by steaming, therefore allowing more of those minerals to be available. That's about one of the only exceptions there are out there where you actually increase nutrient content by cooking. Okay, let's take a look at a few other strategies here. As fresh and ripe as is possible. I know Dr. Cousins said live food was picked within 24 hours. If you've got a garden, if your neighbor has a garden, if you can do that, that's fantastic. But please don't think all is lost if you can't do that. If you go buy lettuce from the grocery store and it's been there for a week and you might not even eat it for a week, it's still going to be super good for you. As raw and fresh and uncooked and unprocessed as possible is the most important. And in fact, I want to take a little field trip, and then we're going to come right back to this, back over to the China project. We spend about an hour on this because it's so incredibly important in our plant-based curriculum and see how all the pieces come together. We don't actually go into it till a few months into the course, so we can really get all the context and see everything fit together. So they say that, this is a quote from Dr. Campbell, the richer the diet is and the kinds and amounts of nutrients provided by foods of plant origin, the lower is the risk for chronic degenerative disease. So you know that, and that's the point is, just to get to that, there's then 2 corollaries. And one of those corollaries is the closer the foods of plant origin are to their native state, in other words, minimal cooking, salting, and processing, the greater will be their benefit. And decades worth of research went into coming to that conclusion. So the least cooking and processing, the best. Once again, steaming can be very helpful to consume more vegetables. You retain the most nutrients and you avoid the creation of carcinogenic substances that higher temperature cooking methods can create. We go into a lot of depth and detail about that in our curriculum. Exercise is also so extremely important. Exercise improves digestion. it seems to improve your satiety mechanisms. So on the one hand, you're hungrier, but on the other hand, you don't eat too much of an excess of calories. You tend to dial in your calorie intake just right. And if you're eating healthy foods like fruits and vegetables, the increased activity increases your calorie requirements. Therefore, you're going to get more nutrients that come with the additional food. And being hungry is extremely important also. All else being equal, if you eat a food when you're hungry and your digestion is at maximum, you are going to benefit from that food more so than if you're not hungry and it's just extra calories that are leading to generation of free radicals and causing other issues you can do without, putting on excess body fat that's pro-inflammatory, etc., etc. So to summarize this, the food has to be ready for the body and the body has to be ready for the food. And I'd like to end off with the acknowledgement of a longtime doctor of the National Health Association, originally called the American Natural Hygiene Society, named Dr. Robert Gross. For years, he ran a place called Pauling Health Manor with his wife Joy, above New York City, but roughly in the southeastern part of New York. My brother and I visited there in the late 80s when we were getting into all this. I had the good fortune of going to a presentation of his one time. And number one, he was talking about the food has to be ready for the body. It's got to be ripe. It's got to be, correct and, made or assembled properly. But then he would say, I'm going to get into my Robert Gross mode here, Dr. Gross, he'd say, the food may be ready for the body, but is the body ready for the food? In other words, that always stuck with me. You have to be hungry and really ready to eat. And that's not that hard to do when you eat large volumes of food that are calorie dense, because that are low in calorie density, nutrient dense is what I meant to say. You can fill up on these foods and then you get hungry a few hours later and then you fill up on more of them. You feel nice and full throughout the day. You get lots of nutrients and you avoid the junk. And that is absolutely fantastic. So we hope you have all thoroughly enjoyed this segment on how to maximize your nutrient intake on a plant-based diet, and it's inspired you to include a great abundance of vegetables and fruit in your daily diets so you can feel your best and be your healthiest. Now that we've finished our educational content for this webinar, we'll move on to take a look at our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition plant-based curriculum. In today's webinar, we touched on just a sliver of what we have to offer. For those of you wishing to continue your education with us, you may want to consider our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online and interactive curriculum. It's a one-year program, and our next group program begins on August 31st, 2022. We recommend a time commitment of 4 to 5 hours per week in order to get the maximum value out of this class. So if you're excited about spending a few hours a week learning for a year and cover the financial commitment, you can dramatically increase your chances for success and enjoy the learning process while you're at it. I'll first tell you about some of the topics we cover in the course, and then I'll go into how it's actually delivered. So first of all, we cover a huge array of topics in the curriculum. Pretty much everything you ever wanted to know about plant-based and raw food nutrition based on our decades of personal research, course development, education, and clinical experience in this field. We cover so many topics: energy healing and calorie density, not just related to weight management, but how you see the overall big picture of health. Dr. Karen then goes into the basics of nutrition, which covers an overview of how so many of these later on topics fit into the big picture. Blood sugar regulation, raw food sources of nutrients, calcium and vitamin D, vitamin B12, essential fats, one of my favorite topics, acid-alkaline balance, cleansing and detoxification. We spend 2 hours an entire week on where do you get your protein. Dr. Karen takes you through the entire digestive system and tells you what's going on in each area from a plant-based perspective. Enzymes, longevity and youth extension, health statistics, history of raw and living foods, and we see the different camps, and then Dr. Karen talks about raw to approaches, the low fruit and the high fruit, how they compare and contrast. Foundations of the raw food diet, food combining, raw food weight loss connection, classic studies in support of plant-based nutrition, Framingham, McDougall, Esselstyn, Ornish, Dr. Campbell's China study. We look at all those classics and we see how they fit into the big picture. We go on to discuss carcinogens that form in foods, certain foods cooked by certain methods, how to avoid them, and if you do include some of those things in your diets, how to minimize the negative effects. More about the effects of heating on food goes into nutrient loss from heating and how you can get things like beta-carotene and lycopene. Even if you decide never to cook your food, it's actually very easy. Organic versus non-organic. Grains and plant families. Why, for example, is quinoa gluten-free when other grains aren't? You know why? Quinoa is in a different plant family, so there's lots and lots of insights to gain there. Making sense of food labels, psychological factors, candida, DHA, xenoestrogens, and phytoestrogens. Juice fasting and water fasting, that's one area where I put my clinical experience as well as some personal experience into the curriculum. Dr. Karen has several sections on superfoods. Are they really super? What's the marketing claim versus the science? Raw food sources of nutrients expanded, raw food exaggerations, the history of human food choices. Was it eating meat and fat that made our brain be big? Was it fruit? Was it starches? Those are the competing theories out there. Dr. Karen goes into a very fair assessment of all of those and tells you the reality, not just the internet hype. Big questions of animal products, importance of sleep, menu planning for various health challenges, expanded view of carbohydrates, more raw food weight loss, sweeteners, the importance of hydration and high water content foods, research in support of raw food nutrition. We look at how raw food diets can lower people's cancer risk, improve their cardiometabolic health, help them recover from diseases like fibromyalgia. So we've got a couple of weeks worth of that. Then Dr. Karen covers nutrient analyses of different plant foods as well as various sample diets, where she looks at some raw food diets, some plant-based diets, paleo, keto, etc. And it's extremely revealing to see what actually comes out of that. I follow the lead from a fatty acid perspective. I look at all different foods and their fatty acid profile, then different diets and how they stack up. We look at a whole bunch of case histories of long-term vegan patients I've worked with special emphasis on omega-3 conversion. So that's another major way I incorporate my clinical experience into the curriculum. More survey of superfoods and supplements, an overview of energy. What happens to excess protein, carbohydrate, and fat when we consume it? What metabolic pathways do they take? Does it depend on other factors? It's very, very revealing. Sea vegetables. Whoa, we need minerals, but we want to avoid those heavy metals. What do? The data's here. Dietary fiber and probiotics and prebiotics covers the microbiome very, very effectively and lets you know how you can support that just by eating a diet that covers so many other bases all at the same time. Borrow a segment used with permission from Dr. Lyle and Goldhammer, my take on the pleasure trap, autonomic nervous system, looking at some of the big pictures of health, overcoming challenges and pitfalls in plant-based and raw food nutrition. From there, we start to go into the educator material of the course. Some of our students educate other people individually as well as teach classes. Most of our students are not interested in doing that. For those students, though, going over this part of the course brings everything together, and it also makes them much more comfortable explaining what they do when people see it's different to friends, family, and coworkers. And a lot of our students are very grateful for that. So before we go into how this content is delivered, wanted to share a couple of student testimonials. Our student Malcolm from the Bronx says, as someone who has adhered to a raw plant-based diet for over 17 years and first began learning about a plant-based diet in the mid-70s, I can honestly say this is one of the most comprehensive courses I have ever witnessed. Carla from Florida, who some of you may remember hearing from on our summit, said, this course was extremely educational. I love how Dr. Rick and Dr. Karen are based on scientific research and show different sides of the arguments. The course teaches you not only about nutrition, but also how to go about all the questions one receives when they change their diet, which is very helpful to be able to cope with normal people. It's a lot of information, very well worth it. She also said separately, thank you for your constant support and education. The conferences were amazing, and I'm going to miss it. So Carla utilizes the information she learned in our course number 1 for her clients who she's teaching to make healthy food. And like she said, just for those normal people who eat normal food, who think you're different. And again, people feel so much more comfortable with the knowledge and the confidence they gain from the course. They're more likely to stick with things over the long term also because they can navigate the waters more easily. Our student Mattis from Estonia said, mastering raw food nutrition is the biggest and most useful raw food course I have seen. My knowledge of physiology and plant-based foods skyrocketed even though I had already been familiar with the topics for 7 years. It helped me to get accurate and balanced information to ultimately fix the consequences of eating an extreme fruitarian diet in the past and become a nutrition counselor in the process. I recommend this course to anyone who is seriously interested in health. So how do we actually go about delivering these kinds of results? So first of all, we have 2 hours worth of professional quality videos per week, very similar to what you're seeing here on this webinar. You watch those at your own schedule, and then every week that 2 more videos come out, 2 more hours worth of videos come out, the old ones stay there so you can watch them as many times as you want. Now, interestingly, every hour or so that you see in our course is maybe 20, 30, 40 or so hours worth of research and putting things together and looking through articles and making sense of the science and putting the presentations together. So it makes extremely efficient use of your time. You can save yourself decades worth of trial and error and just hone in on the time you spend with us. We also have audio MP3s of the video segments. Not too many of our students take advantage of that, but if you want to just have your phone on while you're out exercising or driving when it doesn't make sense to be able to look at a screen, you can just listen to those as well. You can also have your notebooks open. We share with you 4 separate notebooks, about 900 pages worth of content overall, plus all of the scientific references in the back. These notebooks are designed for a couple of things. They've got the charts and the graphs and the data that you're seeing on the video screen in the notebook, so you don't have to madly try to write everything down that you see on and hear on the videos. You can just look at your notebooks, look at the videos, and let the information sink in. And then they're also lifetime reference material. So we'll take a quick look here. Things are laid out in bullet points. They're not transcripts. It took us a long time to put these together, but our students love them and they really enhance the learning process. So we physically mail you these notes, and then they are lifetime reference material, and we even print the title of the course on the side. You can stack all these up, have them on your bookcase, and always be able to grab them. Each week, we also have interactive quizzes to reinforce the main points of that week's lessons. It's interactive. It gives you the right or wrong answer, and then it gives you explanations, again, to help enhance the learning process. So all those things, the notebooks, the videos, and the quizzes, you access those on your own. And then on Tuesdays, every Tuesday except the last Tuesday of the month, we offer live Zoom video conferences. We have students from all over the world, so we actually have them at 2 different times. 10 a.m. Pacific / 1 a.m. Eastern, which is 7 p.m. Central European time and 8 p.m. Israeli time, is one of our conferences. And the other one is for the sort of after work in the North America crowd, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, super early in the morning in Europe and Israel. So most of our students find that no matter where they are in the world, they can attend one of those conferences each week. Now, when you join us live directly, that's fantastic. But if one of those times don't work for you, you can simply type in your questions in advance of the call, and then we audio record and save each conference. So you can type your questions in advance and then listen to the recording after of the answers to your questions, as well as the answers to your fellow students' questions. And to go back just a second, you can see the outline here under the live conference chapter for each week. You can put in your questions, access the conferences, and then access the recording. So it's very convenient and very handy. We don't abandon you. You get to interact with us directly, either in real time or not, throughout the entire course. So many of our students find that so valuable. In addition, you can interact with us a little more and each other. We have social and study groups in the course. Oftentimes, we will submit information to the study group that supports answering questions during the live conferences. And in the social group, students get to know each other and interact and share recipes and experiences. And it's really nice to be able to connect with a tribe of like-minded people that way. Now, all of this is designed for a fun learning experience where you can feel very confident eating a super healthful diet, and you can enjoy abundant health that allows the greatest enjoyment of your lives. So to summarize, there are 2 hours of professional videos per week, similar to what you're seeing here in the content as well as this part of the webinar. We have the audio-only versions available as well. You've got those notebooks that come along with the entire course, weekly interactive quizzes, near weekly video conferences, social and study groups to interact more with us and your fellow students, all designed to give you the knowledge and confidence to keep on track to truly have a lifetime of supercharged health. We'll also mention that we offer a certificate of completion for those students who take 3 exams, and this is separate from the quizzes, and submit a good quality final project. About 50% of our students go through this process. For those students who want to go out and educate other people, they want this certificate to let their people know, their clients and their students, that they took a very comprehensive course and they're serious about what they're doing, and they can most effectively guide other people. Most of our students aren't going out to educate others. They just want this information for themselves, and a lot of them feel like they're spending this time to put in this effort. They want to get a certificate of completion also. You know, speaking of people who want to go out and educate others, we've had several raw food, social media celebrities and educators join us for the course to bring their knowledge up a few levels, and we're always honored when that happens. So there we go. People are jumping for joy. Okay, before finishing up, I have one last testimonial to share. And this is from our student Rena, who lives a couple hours south of us. She said, anybody wanting to make long-term sustainable changes to their diet and nutrition must take this course. There is so much nonsense out there on the internet that it's easy to get confused. I don't know of anyone who has done so much extensive research in every field of nutrition. The best part is they do not give their own opinions, just science and data. They inform and then leave it to us to make our decisions. They permanently changed my relationship with food. I am so much more comfortable with my choices. They do not talk about extremes, and they do not judge and make anyone feel guilty for their choices. They answer all questions calmly and without judgment. It was their love and tolerance for all that brought us all so much closer. I am emotionally and physically so much healthier because of this course. My habits are changing slowly and steadily. I am much happier and calmer person because of this course and because of Dr. Rick and Dr. Karen. This is the best investment I have ever made. I wish the course could go on, but all good things have to end. And then Rena said separately, Dr. Rick and Dr. Karen, you are sent from heaven for us. So we're just so heartfelt and honored when we hear these kind of testimonials. And you know, when you see the ads on TV for weight loss and it always says in the little fine print below, results not typical. This is not one of those situations. Every year that we teach this class, we have several students like Rena who are that grateful, who it's made that much of a difference for. We have lots of other testimonials when you click on our testimonial tab from each class. And again, this is part of what keeps us doing what we do, because it means so much to us to be able to enhance people's qualities of lives that much. So we want to thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. We hope you have found it informative and useful, and please keep an eye on your email for our July and August webinars coming up as well. Now that we've finished the webinar, for those of you here with us live, after a brief intermission, we'll be here to answer questions about our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition curriculum, about the content of the webinar, or plant-based and raw food nutrition questions in general. For those of you considering joining us, you can click on the schedule link that's on your screen right now, which will allow you to set up a time to discuss with us individually if Mastering Raw Food Nutrition is a good fit for you, and vice versa. We look forward to speaking with you soon, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes to answer questions.